Welcome. I have three interesting guests here with me today to talk about strategies for monetizing data, analytics, and AI. Would the three of you please introduce yourselves? Go ahead, starting with John.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. This is John Olsen, calling in from New York. I work for Reltio. I'm a VP of our sales and operations in the European region. Been with Reltio for about 5 years now and have 20 plus years experience working in the data management and business intelligence space.
Awesome. Glenn?
Hi guys, I'm Glenn Fitzgerald. I am the Chief Technology Officer for Fujitsu products business in Europe. I've been with Fujitsu for, I probably think, longer than you've been alive, Robert, nearly 40 years. I've been through a lot of roles in Fujitsu, but at the moment I'm concentrating on a thing we call in Fujitsu the data-driven transformation strategy, which is all about monetizing data, using the AI and similar technologies to extract value from that to solve customers' problems rather than because it's fun.
Outstanding. Stuart?
I'm Stuart Squires. Hello, everybody. Coming to you from the north of England. I'm consulting director for Common Group, and I've spent the last 22 years or so working on data projects under various banners. So there've been data quality improvement, data governance, data management, but all really helping companies get their data right so that they can then, that forms the basis of turning it into a data asset and making something valuable and eventually monetizing it.
All right.
Just pause at that point to say, North of England, represent.
All right. Well, part of my background is in telecom. And in telecom, we've been speaking about data monetization for a very, very long time. And we see that in the telco industry, to a certain degree, it's become turned into a utility that's taken for granted. And these monetization or new revenue streams haven't really materialized in the way that many had hoped, many organizations had hoped. Can each of you present some good sort of cases of organizations that have been able to monetize new services or data itself even in the recent past, ideally companies that you've worked with?
For sure. I don't know if you want to take it in any particular order, Robert. I'll start as I've opened my mouth first. There are several. The key to all of these is understanding two things. It's the problem that the customer wants to address and making sure that data exists in sufficient levels of detail and in the right place to apply the analytical techniques to a positive end. Several examples. One example of a company we worked with, which is a hospitality company in the United Kingdom that owns a lot of restaurants and pubs and things like that. And they had the usual targets for a business in that industry, especially in these times of improving efficiency and reducing cost overhead. We, as Fujitsu, were in the position of having been the provider of their POS services for a long period of time. And therefore, we had an enormous amount of data about those tills, their life cycle, the possible problems and errors, faults that had developed over time, faults that developed quickly. We had that data to hand, and because the customer had given us an imperative to reduce cost, we applied, in this case, an AI approach to all that data to produce a predictive maintenance application that said, instead of waiting for a till to break, we will apply the knowledge we have, notice that till in this place is beginning to return some of the error codes and status reports that indicate in the past it might have a break in the future, and send somebody to maintain that till before it breaks. Because all that data was at hand, that was a relatively simple thing to implement. And the immediate benefit to the customer was that they could then begin to implement in proper the fact that they eliminated pen and paper. from their hospitality estate. Everything was done online, which means it can be properly tracked, which means it can be properly backed up, which means it's properly auditable in the security context. Several benefits as well as just cost. So that's an example that drives this point of having to have the data to hand to make valid use of it in seeking a customer outcome.
Right. So, John, I'd like to hear from you. You have the opportunity of going either for new revenue streams and new business models or optimizing existing ones. Which one is more ready at hand when it comes to monetizing data in your experience?
Well, in this time, I think a lot of people are focused on customer experience, digital transformations, digital initiatives. And how do we create new business models to support the new world that we live in? I can give you, a good example of some of the work we've done in luxury retail, for example, where, there was a quote by one of our customers that said in the last 10 weeks, their e-commerce business has grown more than it's grown in the last 10 years. And which makes sense, right? Nobody can go to the stores. So you have to go through, e-commerce channels. So they need to adapt to that. But there's a massive change in that industry, as far as millennials and, who's buying their products and the white glove real-time treatment that they want. And this varies by countries around the world. So you have, Instagram and Facebooks and YouTube and influencers that are promoting their brands, and they need to take advantage of that and give them their customers the white glove experience that they expect when they walk into their stores. So if somebody, a Japanese, individual goes into a store in Paris, there's an expectation that who I am. And what my preferences are, and potentially what size shirt I wear. So there's that cross-sell, upsell monetization that is going on, but it's also, reaching out to, get new buyers and bringing them into your community and getting more of a connection with them so you can monetize the new business that's coming in the door as well.
Right. Stuart, what about you, the cases that you've seen?
I'd quite like to come back to something that the area that Glenn was talking about, hospitality. Mm-hmm. And yes, this is stereotypical to Englishmen from the north talking about pubs and restaurants. But we do quite a lot of work in the pubs and restaurants business. And one of the areas where data is always troublesome, and it ends up in the till, is allergens and nutrition. So making sure that the data about allergens and nutrition is correct. Because if it isn't correct, then somebody can walk in, have a plate of food, have something that they're allergic to, and something bad can happen. Right. So you've got a choice as a business. You can either manage that data yourself and have nutritional lists, or you can outsource it. And there are companies out there that specialize in making sure that the nutritional information about ingredients and cooking methods are correct. And they take the accountability for that, but it comes at a price. So the collection, the working with the vendors, working with the manufacturers to make sure that that data is accurate comes at a cost, but it's a cost that companies can make money on. And when you feed that into a master data management system or a ingredients and recipe management system that eventually squirts its data into the tills, then you've got that provenance, you've got that trust in the data, and somebody's made money out of it. So I think that's a very good example.
Well, going back then to what Glenn said, he said that one of the prerequisites that they had in place was high quality data. And many things are required for successful data and AI innovation strategies. You need good data. You need skilled individuals, highly technical individuals. I've found that oftentimes you need one individual, but perhaps you can do it with many, that have a vision for what kind of an outcome you want. And then you need the ability to do change management. Which one of these are the most challenging to tackle in your experience?
At the moment, skills without a doubt. Mm-hmm. This is both in terms of the use of modern analytics techniques and in the application of machine learning or neural networking, and in some of the other, perhaps at the moment, slightly more fringe technologies, like annealing and quantum computing, or binary chain technologies and things like that. They're relatively new technologies. There's no stream, in my experience anyway, of qualified graduates coming out of universities and so on and so forth. Majority of the people who are skilled in this way have skilled themselves. Often they're involved in startups. Often they're invested in the startup. And it's a difficult thing to educate. If you think about, generally speaking, sales and pre-sales communities, even the IT professionals at the moment, many of them don't have mathematics backgrounds. Mathematics backgrounds are important to understand this kind of technology because, let's not forget, perhaps the most badly named technology in the history of the world is artificial intelligence, which is actually neither artificial nor intelligence. It's just statistics. So finding people who can apply those skills in a business context is very challenging. And certainly in terms of my business across Europe, probably the most significant break on it at the moment is finding the right people.
Okay. And so this skill gap that we find, is that something that applies only to the technical resources, or is there sort of a data literacy gap in the, because to me, it seems like a chicken and eggs scenario where you want to build an organization, but you're not necessarily equipped with the vocabulary to express your needs. John,
and you're quite right. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Sorry to talk across, but it's clearly you need different levels of that capability in terms of architecting and delivering a solution, and in terms of being aware enough of its potential to be able to sell it, but both are lacking. Yes.
John, what's your experience with people that want to expand their organization with these types of skills? Is that the major hurdle in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yes, I agree that skills are probably the primary thing that needs to be addressed. But, you know, it all starts with sort of a top-down, sort of an executive sponsor or a vision of what you want to do and where you're trying to go. You know, our experience, we deal mostly with global 2,000 companies that, you know, are large. They have a lot of data. They have a lot of, you know, channels in which they do business through. They're typically mastering a lot of different domains. They need to understand a lot of relationships. And we're on this modern data management platform, which is big data and, you know, machine learning, and it has a lot of this newer type stuff involved. So getting the skill sets to support this modern infrastructure is important, but I think there is a divide still between business and IT. So the business is very much into how do I get quick results, and maybe they'll lean towards, you know, some, you know, best of breed point front end solution that they think is going to get them where they want to be within a few weeks or months. Where, you know, IT is more complicated than that, because, you know, we have very, you know, advanced relationships with our distribution network or our customers, and that all, the data quality behind that and sustaining that and that whole data governance is extremely important to make sure these data-driven applications are powered with, you know, clean, reliable, trusted data. And that's really sort of where we fit in, is more the data management layer, so we can feed the machine learning tools so they can do their jobs effectively.
I'd like to follow that tangent a little bit with you, Stuart, where the question is, you have the opportunity of pursuing an AI strategy by buying industry packaged solutions, or develop, you know, trying to build up skills in-house, developing your own models, developing your own infrastructure and all that kind of thing. Among the successful projects that you've seen for monetizing data, have they leaned more towards the developing things quickly in-house and skilling up, or have they started with, you know, low-hanging fruit, industry-proven solutions, that kind of thing?
That's a very good question. And at the data guy, not having the data in front of me to answer that exactly, This is going to be more opinion, really, and an observation rather than statistical fact. One of the important things for any of us is making sure that whatever initiative you're doing is aligned to some business strategy, some burning platform, something that's going to actually add value. You can have teams with brilliant people working your way, doing some absolutely superb work, but they're not actually delivering any value. There's a dog somewhere in the background.
Right.
I don't know whether it is me.
I think that's probably my neighbour's dog. Sorry, not much I can do.
Sorry, I lost my thread then with dogs. So yeah, it's about finding a business problem that it is worth solving and people see the value in it. Because you can fix a whole lot of small things and get really happy about it and say, yes, look what we've done. But if it's not actually added value to anybody, or it's not added any value to the asset of your data, then you've wasted a whole lot of time. Now, that hasn't answered your question of whether it's better being outsourced or insourced, buying something off the shelf. If you have a specific problem to solve, and there is something that you can pick up off the shelf to solve it, and you don't have to invest in a team of data scientists, then that can be a very good way of getting started. And maybe even if you start proving value out of that technology and out of the governance and the management that you can put around that, almost that flow of business demand, a cloud of scientists. I don't know what the collective noun for data scientists are. A body of people who actually deliver value, and then you can repeat that. Then starting small, starting external, it could be the best way to go.
I think Silicon Valley probably has a cool word for a cloud of data scientists that I don't know about quite yet, but
I think you'll find it's an argument.
Got it. Well, I mean, the thing with picking something that's in-house or developed, as a ready-made solution, sort of presupposes that it's a problem that's already solved. Maybe it's well established. And when I compare what best practice in machine learning and databases are, the field of databases is a very mature field. It's very reasonable to talk about what best practice is, whereas in machine learning, we're sort of building the ship as we sail. And in this case, one of the questions becomes, if you think that AI is supposed to provide a competitive advantage, meaning your competitors don't have it and you do, so you're marginally better, there's two questions that follow. One is, are there things where AI can't help? Where everybody's so excited they're just trying to do AI on everything, and it's just not a good idea. And then are there other areas where it's obvious that the fruit is low hanging? Glenn, maybe you can start by saying areas where you think that people are trying to apply AI, but it's a bad idea to begin with.
Okay. You can point at many examples of this type of thing that have failed, because they do. It's new technology, and quite often the problem is that the data doesn't exist in insufficient quality or amount. But more often than that, coming back to something that my colleagues have said, it's that where there isn't a clear view of an outcome, where there isn't an executive sponsorship behind some change, because it's very rare that a change occurs inside an organization that's trying to employ AI technology that doesn't have other implications of change for the organization. A particular example that I was involved in quite recently was at a large bank, and that bank had got a reduced cost imperative from its board. This was not retail banking. This was investment banking in Canary Wharf. And we were talking to their credit card arm, and their credit card arm was wanting to apply AI to the fraud detection on credit card transactions.
Right.
Perhaps counterintuitively, the problem they have really with that is false positives. So they usually detect real fraud. They quite often detect stuff that isn't real fraud, but is the card carrier deciding to go on a short break without telling them. And they stop the transaction, and it annoys the customer who uses his other credit card, and they lose the business. So we were involved in that, and that was very successfully applied because they had the data, because they had the expertise, because they had the defined outcome, which is now you're going to say, well, why are you talking about that? Because I asked you about failure. Well, the reason I'm talking about that is because while we were having that conversation, a chap from another department happened to walk past the door and hear what we're talking about and come to talk to us about what he wanted to do, which was around automation of insurance underwriting. Right. Now, I don't know much about this. But insurance underwriting is apparently a relatively mechanistic task. You have a risk set of tables, you have actuarial tables, you have previous experience inside an organization. You combine all these things together, and an actuary says, yes, this is risk worth taking, or no, it isn't. And if it is, the premium will be this much. Sounds like something that would be relatively simple to apply automation to, because they have all the data, they have a clear desired outcome. But what they hadn't anticipated was problems that weren't technology related in nature. The problems were to do with what would happen to the insurance underwriters who were replaced by this system, and the impact of that on the organization, and the fact that they weren't going to just accept that, and politics happened, like politics often does, and it was killed in birth. So I think often the reason is only concentrating on the narrow focus of technology and not understanding that this kind of change affects a business in its entirety, and you have to account for all of that before you start fiddling with these things.
All right. Well, it sounds like all of the things we spoke about before, the good data, the skills, and the vision need to be in place in order for it to be successful, that they are the prerequisites. And then even then, it's not clear.
Well, that's not always enough. No.
Yeah. And what about you, John? I mean, are there things that are, I mean, we know that there are many ways to fail, but are there any sort of areas that are inherently not suitable for AI?
Sorry, I just distracted there for a second. So I was going to, not suitable for AI. So the way that Reltio looks at this is, we're a master data management solution. So we're all about, pulling data together, cleaning it up, organizing it, and sort of preparing it for the business, whether it's marketing, sales, or your compliance needs. Mm-hmm. We get into consent and what have you. Now, we use machine learning and artificial intelligence a couple of different ways that are sort of centered around what we do. So one is around data quality. So how can we, make sure we understand the data quality score of a particular customer, and should we be focused in that area? Or, maybe a ranking profile of all of our customers, and who, are maybe our top customers. We need to be focused on those versus, and to sort of prioritize the workload for the data stewards. We also use it in a different way, where we pull in all behaviors and interactions, so we can write algorithms to figure out what the next best offer should be for a customer, or to provide a salesperson with this knowledge of the relationship, so they can have a more effective meeting. So we have like a life sciences customer that has 10,000 reps out in the field, and they use the Reltio mobile application so they can walk into a clinic and understand the relationship that their firm has with a doctor or a hospital or a clinic, and be able to have a constructive conversation about what products, he can sell them, and how much business they've done, and so on. So, we keep it very constrained to what our use case is. And now we believe that, a data lake or some kind of operational system or analytical system needs clean, reliable data. So garbage in is garbage out. I think we've all heard that. So right. We want to make sure the data that goes into these lakes or, BI tools is good, so you get, the results out of those systems that you need. So we've all heard about the data lakes and that have become swamps, and people have tried to do machine learning and artificial intelligence on top of those. And it seems like a lot of them have boiled the ocean, and have resulted in, not, great results, and they sort of lose momentum and executive sponsorship. Right. So we try to keep it very confined to what, we do and what kind of value we can bring the business.
I think all four of us walk around with a giant hammer of machine learning, looking to hammer things in. I really do believe that AI, in principle, should be able to be applied everywhere. But I'd like, Stuart, you look like you want to add to that notion.
Yeah, well, it was adding to John's data quality notion, and he moved on to some of the things that I wanted to say. So thank you. But I was thinking about the actual value of data and data as an asset, and in terms of how Reltio and other companies use artificial intelligence to improve data quality and therefore increase the value of an actual data asset. And if you can quantify how to value that data, then you've got a target. If there's a market there who value that data, whether they want to buy it or whether you want to reduce your costs of producing it and looking after it, that's a really good aim to have. And I use an analogy of a diamond. So the size of a diamond, the carat of a diamond, that drives its potential value. So if you have a bigger diamond, it's going to be bigger. It's going to be more expensive, more valuable than a smaller diamond. But there's the other measurements of a diamond. There's the clarity. So what imperfections are in it, the color, how pure is it? What's the other one? Cut. So how it's presented. So and it doesn't matter what market value of diamonds in general are. If you've got a diamond of a particular size and it's a better cut, it's a better clarity, and it's a better color, then it's going to be more valuable. Now, there's two things around that. One is you can't clean a diamond to make it more better quality. You can clean your data. So if there's an intrinsic market value of your data, then you can improve and increase its value in a marketplace. You can't really do that with a diamond. But it comes to the definition of what is good, what is valuable. We see a lot of companies who concentrate on sorting out their data debt. So understanding what's valuable to them within their business, and that might be adhering to rules that are baked into their existing systems, their existing processes. So they're building this thing that's valuable for them. But that might not actually be an asset that other people want to buy. What's the definition? What's the clarity, cut, and color set of definitions that everybody in the marketplace values? And what we've been seeing at the moment, and even Gartner brought it up as one of its trends for this year, the data marketplace, where organizations are teaming together with regulatory bodies or industry bodies to define what those definitions are. Is it clarity, is it color, is it cut that makes this data perfect? So then you've got something to aim for. So you're either aiming for that perfect data in order to sell it to somebody, or you're saying, well, I don't want to spend any money on looking after this data, and I know there's an intrinsic value of data that has these measures, so someone can provide it for me. And that's the monetization that the data pools, the data marketplaces are using. And it's not a new thing. There's been data pools for a long time, but there really is an acceleration at a industry-specific level. So be that the electrical distribution industry or the building industry or allergens and nutrition.
I want to push back a little bit here and hear what your thoughts are on the following. I'm of the opinion that the ideation and coming up of a way to operationalize data is really the hard part. My favorite author, Asimov, said that many people often came to him with an idea for writing a book, some sci-fi idea, and they said, I know you're good at writing, so you can write the book and I'll just take half the profits. And the hard part is writing the book. It's not coming up with that initial idea. But in effect, we're seeing that a lot of companies are having trouble even coming up with the initial idea. What smart things can we do with the data? And then also operationalizing it. Glenn, where do you see companies, do you also see that companies have a hard time coming up with ideas, or are they full of ideas, but the execution is the hard part?
I think the ideas thing is dependent upon the company. And it is possible to run a series of profiles and questions and work with a company and work out where they sit on a thing we've called the data maturity index, right? Mm-hmm. So there are companies, and we all know who they are, who are completely in control of their data, who exploit it as much as they can and as much as they need. They're at the top of that curve. They need no help from us or probably anybody else. We'll leave them to that. That's fine. At the other end of the curve, there are organizations, there are companies to whom data management and data exploitation are probably not of great value. Quite often, organizations that are based in human service. If you're running a hairdresser's, then data is of limited value to you, unless you're talking about stuff like stock management and things like that, which is relatively trivial anyway. In the middle, there's a majority of organizations, and the majority of those organizations share characteristics of having a lot of data, not really knowing where it is, not really knowing what they could do with it if they'd found it, and in many cases being actively terrified of it. Data regulation, you mentioned, Stuart, but regulation and legislation is becoming more focused. It's becoming more draconian. Change is happening all the time. Recently in Germany, the law changed such that data about German citizens must no longer be held in Germany. It must be held in the federal state of their residence, which has given lots of people a bit of a heart attack, because that means the data has to follow people as they move. Work that out if you can. I've got to take his row out of this database and move it into that database. That's all fun. So I think that even if you can help a company to come to terms with its own data lack of awareness and knowledge, then what to do with that data is a variable pie. It doesn't seem to me to depend upon vertical or maturity of a business. It's largely to do with the clarity of the vision of the people that are driving the business. Even with all the data, it's not necessarily easy to have a good idea about what to do with it.
But
it's quite easy to have a bad idea about what to do with it.
You said something before about a maturity index.
Yes.
Does that mean that people should still sort of be thinking that there is a way to be methodical about coming up with ideas for how AI can help you?
Well, if you okay, so application of method to ideas is a philosophical question that you need to discuss with brighter people than me. Human creativity is not subject to method, as far as I know. You probably need Schopenhauer and Kant to discuss that with, rather than a poor old IT guy like me. But I can tell you from experience that where the ideas are good, they come from the people who are executing the process.
So from the organization.
From when the ideas of how to use data to improve a function almost inevitably come from the people who are working with that function on a day-to-day basis, because they know the thing and they know what needs to get better. So if you can talk to them, those guys, about this is the potential of data, this is what you could do with the data, this is how it might change your life, then it's usually the people that are operating it on a day-to-day basis that come up with the ideas that work. Right. That's just experience. There's no fact in that. That's just opinion.
We have a lot of introductions and a lot of workshops with people, and we just walk in and say, tell us what's going wrong. Tell us what is causing you a nightmare. What would make your life better? And then you take that away and process it. And then, because a lot of the people know what the solution is, or they know what they would like the world to look like. They just don't know how to get there.
And this process of applying that knowledge to the knowledge of other people around how to do it, and a third group of people that know why to do it, you put these things together, you get an outcome. In Fujitsu, we call this co-creation workshops. This is just Fujitsu's way of describing almost exactly what Stuart's just described. What's important is getting the various stakeholders and the various groups of people with the right set of knowledge in a place to have the conversation.
I think this industry bears many similarities with the internet revolution of the early 2000s is equally disruptive and requires that sort of ideation. And it's nice to hear that you're so humble about it, because I think it's really necessary, in my experience, to have these sort of unpretentious ideation scenarios and not really just rely on the center of excellence
to come
up with all the ideas.
I remember the most impressive thing I saw. We were at one of those workshops in Stockholm, and there was a young Polish lady who was with a very small Polish startup. She was really bright. And in an afternoon, she produced a neural network that could read architectural blueprints from nothing, with no idea of, before we started that meeting, of what architectural blueprints were or why they would profit from a neural network, which, as it turns out, is because blueprints are handwritten generally. And to turn those into something that you can use computer-aided design tools on to actually build the building, you need to translate one to the other. Neural networks are good for that. Took her an afternoon because somebody with exactly the right set of skills, in this case mathematical skills and an understanding of neural networks, was being fed with information from people who knew nothing about that, but lots about architecture and lots about how you could take that architecture and build computers to run the thing on. It's quite often an ecosystem activity these days.
John,
Robert,
many people. Sorry, go ahead, Stuart.
Reflect on something that you just said in terms of how we're reflecting the early 2000s and the dot-com boom or bubble. There were a lot of failures. There was a lot of activity, but the bubble burst. A lot of companies disappeared. And I think we've not got to be afraid of that happening again. And that's why startups are so important. And people like Glenn's Polish lady is so important, because they may stumble across something that is so valuable.
Here.
You may stumble across 100 other things that fail.
Right. So in order to not be stuck like a deer in headlights and be sort of paralyzed by this getting started, John, I've come across many companies that have simply told me, yeah, I mean, we know AI is interesting, but it's not really for us. We don't have enough data. We don't have any data at all. And I know I've seen tattoo artists that have made tools that help their customers describe what tattoos they want using a fun AI-driven visual assistive tool. So you could argue that even small businesses stand to benefit from clever implementations of AI and data management. What do you say to those customers that say we don't have any interesting or enough data to get started with these types of technologies? Oh, you're muted.
Okay, thank you.
There we go.
So interesting question. I mean, maybe not the right question for me or us, because, you know, we, like I mentioned, only focus on 2,000 customers. So having enough data is typically not a problem. They have a lot of sources. They have, you know, there's been a lot of M&A activity. You know, there's lots of businesses within the business. So data is the volume of data is typically one of the major issues that they have. How do we monetize data? How do we, you know, there's this new term of data is the new oil, right? How do we, you know, cash in from all this intelligence that we have about our customers through all the different channels that they interact with us and seeing their behaviors and trends and stuff are. So, you know, I was going to come back to a point you were talking about earlier about how do we operationalize this data and how do we do smart things with the data. You know, we have if you look at, you know, our customers and you go into their investor presentations and you see the CEO talking about what their vision is and where they're going, you know, you are normally going to see something about customer experience, about digital transformation, about, you know, putting something in place that's going to make them more competitive and you know, improve their, you know, connectivity with their customers. So we sort of play on that to a large degree. So when we're bringing this data together and we're cleaning it all up, the whole MDM part is the blocking and tackling. That's the table stakes. Everybody absolutely needs to do that. It's really more of what outcomes do you need to do, whether they're operational or they're analytical. So we're feeding analytical systems so you can do, advanced analytics, ML, just reporting on, financial aspects. But most of our customers are operational, so it's real time. So an example would be a Subway, which is the sandwich shop. We are integrated into their mobile app. So if you get out of work and at a certain time, you may get an alert saying, hey, maybe you want to pick up a sandwich on your way home. They already have your preferences. They already know exactly what you order every time you come in. Do you want to make any modifications to this? We'll have it ready for you when you drive by. So, we're working with large systems integrators where they go in with digital platforms to put this in. And we're not a campaign management system. We're not a machine learning system. We're not a CRM, but they have all the pieces sort of connected together so they can drop it in and immediately get a business. I mean, in Subway's case, they use one of our partners to sort of manage their digital business. And, Reltio happens to be the foundation for the data to power systems like Adobe and Salesforce and other applications that they use.
Right.
So, not sure if I answered your question, Robert. I'm sorry, but I didn't have much to say on small companies.
This is an area where you can segue quite easily between a number of topics. It's not entirely clear if there's a silver bullet to success. It seems like you need to pick the best a little bit from everywhere. So, with that said, this year has been a pretty special year, and it seems like the circumstances will remain, if not the same, at least changed for at least the coming year. So with that said, could you guys give a little advice to people that are looking to monetize their data this coming year, especially in light of the circumstances? Stuart?
So I think I've labored the point enough that, in my opinion, you'll struggle to monetize your data if it isn't of a good quality. And we can almost use this remote working new paradigm as an excuse to improve how our processes work. Because a lot of processes in a lot of businesses, a lot of big businesses and a lot of old businesses, they rely on the water cooler conversations. They rely on talking to your friend to get a piece of data to be updated. And we've lost that. So using that as an excuse to make your processes more robust, so that when you do go back, you're not stopping the water cooler conversations. That's half of what makes going to work a good thing. But the quality of your data out of the other end of your sausage machine isn't dependent on your water cooler conversations. And also, we've seen a lot of our customers, they've taken the advantage of not being able to trade to sort out some of the data, just throw bodies at fixing data quality. So not artificial intelligence, just intelligence to sort of about.
I really like that idea of taking this opportunity to change your processes now that people are interacting differently. What about you, Glenn? What do you say?
I think this is something that requires a crystal ball. You can see that there are significant changes in the area of public policy. Some of those significant areas in the changes of public policy are going to have serious consequences. And those serious consequences you can help to ameliorate by the application of database technologies. I'll give you, people aren't in offices. The people who paid for the offices that people aren't going to anymore are working out that actually maybe I don't need 16 floors on that tower block in Canary Wharf anymore, and I can save myself how many millions a year it is in that hire, which is all very good if you're the company that is not going to do that hire anymore and is going to use remote working technologies and better data management technologies and better collaboration technologies to maintain the productivity of the workforce in that environment. And I take very much Stuart's point. We have lost the water cooler conversations, and they aren't replaced by video conferencing. There needs to be a replacement for that, and that you begin to see some collaboration technologies that are perhaps moving in that direction, but they need to get better. But if you're the guy who's got an empty skyscraper, it's a completely different conversation. So from the very basic of that guy having better building management systems, so that he at least isn't heating empty space, or at least not heating it just enough to stop it degrading. In terms of the response of the businesses around the foot of that skyscraper that depended on footfall at lunchtime for their business, and that footfall isn't there anymore, what are they going to do? They've got to reach out to the people that used to use them in their new environment, and that requires exploitation of customer relationship material. It requires innovation in reaching those customers with new things. I did see one that this is all anecdote, of course, but there's a German street, which is in England, where people get very nice shirts. And there were many outlets for German street shirt makers around Canary Wharf, and they're all empty now. So German Street have taken to podcasts directed at consumers and saying, look at this nice shirt, who happens to be wrapped around the torso of somebody who's considerably more attractive than you, but we won't mention that because you'll think it is you and you'll think it's great and buy it. So it's about innovation and adaptation, because it's not going to go back to the same as it was before. Yeah. Some of the stuff I've seen from UK government suggests that at least a third of people who've started working remotely will continue working remotely for the majority of their time. The serious impacts of that to society, we're still working those through.
Right. John, what about on your side? Predictions for the coming year, advice? Muted? Let's see if I can go ahead and help out here. You're muted on your side.
Thank you. Thank you, Goran. Apologies. I'm trying to be polite during when I'm not talking.
Yeah, good.
You know, so our business actually has accelerated through this period, and it's interesting, right? Because we're sort of, for the most part, infrastructure, and it's not, it's a very complicated, expensive, sort of time-consuming task to sort of put in a data management platform to support the enterprise. But we are extremely busy right now, and you think industries like life sciences and healthcare and financial services, and surprisingly, retail and CPG are doubling down right now, because I think they feel like this is a time where they can do things to come out stronger on the other end of this. And as we know, technology, if you don't do anything for 6 to 12 months, that's light years in technology. So right. They are heavily investing in new technologies, including machine learning and artificial intelligence, to they're going to do a quantum leap over the competitors that are not doing anything during this time. So we are very, very, very busy, which, hey, it's great. I'm very happy I'm busy, even though it's July, August, and I want to take some time off. I'm working on 10 RFPs right now. I mean, I'm okay, fine. But, I think they'll be happy they did that when we get on the other side of this, because, they'll have not wasted all that time, sort of thinking about how horrible the world could be if things don't go the right way. They're just like saying, hey, we're going to figure this out. We'll get to the other side of this. And meanwhile, we have doubled down on what we need to do in order to change to the new world, right? It's going to change, right? We're going to have customer expectations, the way we interact with customers, the way they go and procure products, the way they, how they go to work. Everything is going to be modified, and they're making some, predictions and guesses on what that might look like. And they're just making sure that, they can get through it, and survive, but even be stronger on the other end of this by being proactive and, making sure data is going to be monetized.
I think we can say for sure that despite the circumstances, it doesn't mean that you can hit the pause button on your business. And it seems like a lot of organizations are taking this opportunity to do some housekeeping when there's less hustle and bustle of ordinary business. So thank you all very much for your input on this panel on monetizing data analytics and AI in 2020. Stuart, Glenn, and John, thank you. And we will be right back, everybody, with another session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having us. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Goran.